Have you ever been corrected for saying a common phrase incorrectly? Yeah, us too.
This goes back very often to words in English that either sound the same or very similar. So we end up accidentally substituting these words that have sometimes funny meanings that don't actually fit with the original phrase.
So to learn the correct way to say a few phrases we may have been saying wrong, we turn to team lead at Babble, Todd Ehresmann. First up, is the correct phrase all intensive purposes or all intents and purposes?
So we often will hear the phrase for all intensive purposes, when in fact the correct phrase is for all intents and purposes. The original meaning of this phrase is in a practical sense or essentially.
Whereas intensive would mean
Something more like deeply or to a large degree. So in effect, this for all intensive purposes doesn't really make any sense whatsoever.
Next up, is it ScotchFree, Scot-free, or Scot-free with one T?
We'll often hear ScotchFree, or we'll often read Scot-free, S-C-O-T-T, free, when in fact the original phrase is scot-free with one T. The original meaning here is getting away unharmed or unpunished from something.
And for those of you who have been using the phrase scotch-free, I guess that just means you're out of booze. And for those writing the phrase with two T's, well, that's just some guy named Scott. Sorry to all the Scots out there. Oh, and fun fact.
The word Scot goes back to medieval times and referred to a tax or a levy that was placed upon you.
So when you get off scot-free, just don't tell the IRS. Moving along with case in point versus case in point.
So you'll often hear people say case and point. And this, I have to admit, is one that I also was doing wrong for a long time before I learned that the correct phrase is case in point. The original meaning is to put emphasis on an argument or a point that you're making, and case and point still somehow sounds intuitive. That's my case, that's my point, but it's incorrect.
Okay, this final one's tricky. Is it honing in or homing in?
So you may often hear someone say honing in with an N, and it might sound correct, but in fact the correct phrase is homing in with an M.
If you were confused by that one, well, don't be too hard on yourself, cuz
The incorrect form actually sounds pretty convincing, because to hone something is to sharpen something, and we think, okay, I'm honing in, I'm sharpening it, I'm getting closer, but in fact we're going back to the original word to home in on something, which means to zoom in, to aim, to get closer to the point that we're aiming for.
like homing pigeons that always make their way back. Now we can be those smart, annoying people that correct everybody else. Isn't that the point?